its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to Success Secrets Exposed with Sally A. Curtis, where we share stories of challenge, success, and inspiration, along with practical tips and strategies to move you forward to your success. And now, here is your host, Sally A. Curtis.
Good evening, good morning, and welcome to you all to another episode of Success Secrets Exposed. I'm very, very excited to be sharing a very important topic with you today. We're going to be talking about being an empowering caregiver, as many of us do end up being caregivers for family members as we grow older in our own lives. So a super excited conversation for you today. For those that are actually new to the show, I'm a content repurposing whiz for speakers, authors, coaches, and consultants. I effectively help them turn their existing content and collateral into new profits. An example of that is turning a book into 2 years worth of social media posts, all designed to help them increase their visibility, their credibility, and their profitability. But as I said, a very important topic to discuss with you today, being an empowering caregiver. So my guest today is Susanne White, who believes caregivers are warriors. They're fearless, courageous, and passionate about protecting those they care for. And I couldn't agree more. Inspired by her own passion for caregiving for others and her personal journey caring for her parents, Susanne created the Caregiver Warrior, which is a resource and hub and an interactive place for those that actually do take care of others. It's a very important place to be able to find supportive ways that you can actually take care of yourself as a caregiver. Susanne shares her wisdom from the inside of caregiving, offering her experience, strength, and hope to other caregivers so they can actually survive the caregiving journey with grace and their own empowerment. So can I ask you to please welcome to the show, Susanne?
Hello.
Hello to you. I'm so excited to be able to share this episode with you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been really looking forward to this. I think we can have a really wonderful conversation, around this important topic.
Yeah, very much so. So I'd love, as you know, I always like to start the show with asking you to share with us a little bit of your backstory. That's why I don't give any spoiler alerts away early, because I'd love you to share sort of a little bit more of your backstory with the audience so we can sort of kick it off.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening to us can relate to this. I'm sort of a type A perfectionist personality. And I was at a position in my life where if you had told me when I was maybe a teenager, my 20s, 30s, even 40s, that I'd be taking care of my parents, I would have told you that you were absolutely crazy, especially my mother, because we did not get along at all. And I used to think it was because we were so different. Now I know it's because we're so much alike.
Yes.
But they, my parents were really devoted to each other. They were from the greatest generation, and they basically were hiding the fact from my sister and I that my mom was beginning to go into early stages of dementia. And they were very good at it. And they worked together as a team, a really good team, not only the early part of their lives, but to also hide this from us. So we knew my mom was kind of getting forgetful. And, as you see people you love become elders, you're more protective. But we never imagined that they were in any kind of trouble. And we always go to holidays. We fly to Florida usually for the holidays, and my parents flew down. I was to follow them later, a day or two, and my sister called and said that my dad was so sick that they had to take him off the flight in a wheelchair. And I know, and the irony was that he was a World War II bombardier pilot during World War II and shot down and survived and landed the plane. I mean, he was a war hero, and it was the second time he was taken off a plane, wounded. You know what I mean? Which kind of which kind of ironic. And he was basically facing caregiver burnout. Um,
Wow.
he was just exhausted. He had walking pneumonia, and he was also developing some heart issues. So, you know, we were kind of shocked. And as he was recuperating, we noticed that because he was, you know, he had walking pneumonia, so he was sleeping a lot. We really noticed that my mom was really lost, that she was really repeating herself and confused. And as he was recuperating, I said to him, Daddy, you know, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you guys need me to help? And he said yes so fast that I was like, oh, okay. And I just jumped into what I found to be my caregiving journey. I mean, there was, you know, there's for so many of us who are hardwired to be caregivers, you don't even think about it. I mean, it's not something you mull over, you know, and a good percentage of us come to caregiving rather quickly.
Yes.
It was just something you do. You just sort of jump in. So I was going to fix everything and fix it right away and make everything okay. And I started on a very interesting caregiving journey. So
Yeah.
that's the backstory of where I started.
And I think that's so evident for so many people. It's an element that I didn't realize for myself until you actually reshared that story with me, is that you actually do end up in that caregiving role. The word that came up for me as you were sharing was instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no preparation. Being a plotter and a planner, and you know that type A control freak. I don't know why we get along so well. You know, I would have planned things out. It would have been in my diary. We would have been organised. Everything else would have been sorted. Yeah, but you don't get that opportunity. You just land in it, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long do you know how long your dad had actually been caring in that care? I know they were a great team, but how long had he actually been caring for your mum to experience that burnout?
It had to be at least a couple years, you know. You know, and those of us who know dementia or Alzheimer's, you know, it's a very sneaky and devastating disease, you know, because it you know, and there's so much research being done. You know, it's different. It just like people are unique and individual, so is each person's, you know, disease. So, you know, we don't really know for sure, but I would say at least a couple of years. Now that I look back, you know, and I, you know, that I know, and in hindsight, you know, I could see that she was stumbling, you know, and that's part of some of the things we can even talk about, you know, and we all kind of go into denial. When we see someone, when we start to lose someone, or we see them failing or getting older, I think that, and I've written about this, I think that some of that denial is positive, and I think some of it's dangerous, because I think, you know, it pretends that something bad's going to happen. So I think sometimes we sort of excuse things away. And they didn't do it maliciously, and I've definitely forgiven them. I mean, I was angry, you know, in the beginning. I'm very upfront about how my feelings went, and I was mad. I was angry. I was angry at my mom. I was angry at my mom anyway. You know, but I realize now that they had the right and the space to make that decision and do it their way. I mean, it was their life. You know, it was their lives. I mean, they did what they thought was right. And I think the way it played out, which I think is really important to let things play out quite often, was exactly the way it was supposed to.
I'd love to unpack a little bit. You've talked about the denial and being positive, and then denial being negative. So let's talk about both of those scenarios, so people again have got a concept and can see it, because I think for us today it's about helping others join the dots retrospectively, and it might be just their immediate retrospectively, because joining the dots is where all of our lessons and our hindsight comes. So if we can shine the light on some of those today through some of the sharing that we can do, that would be awesome.
Yes, you know, I think we protect ourselves. You know, I think that, you know, and it's something we're all going to do. It's something that we do. I think, you know, and I think in quite a few cases it's a good thing. I mean, I think that we don't want to believe someone we love is being hurt or upset. So I think that we do protect ourselves and perhaps work around it.
Mm,
And I think in some cases it's good because it allows them the space to grow into what's happening themselves.
mm,
I mean, when we, I was also a helicopter caregiver. I had to learn how to not do that too. Do you know what I mean? Like, you sort of hovering over everything all the time. And I think by sort of kind of turning, a blind eye a little bit, did give them a little bit of time and space to work together and be together and to sort of adjust
mm,
to what was happening to them and was happening to her. So I think in
mm,
that way, I think that's sort of a universal kind of spiritual thing that we have that sort of helps us a little bit. And
mm,
I think that's the positive side of it. I think the negative part of it is that, it can be dangerous in that when, the people that we love are afflicted with disease or a change in the way they maneuver the world,
mm.
they can become frightened and alone and before they know it. And I think that it's important to sort of be prepared in that what certain warning signs are as people age.
Yeah,
And I think it's necessary to sort of be prepared in that way
yeah,
without carrying that burden of looking for it and poking around constantly and
yeah.
making people nervous. It's
Agitating, yes.
you know,
Yeah,
it's always about the balance, no matter what we're doing. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's that balance that we try to get to that I find so hard to get to, but I'm constantly striving. And
yeah,
it's a balance of working with them and navigating,
yeah.
the new normal.
Yes, I remember we shared before, and when my mum was going through it, through very early stages, and then again, you don't notice it until you start looking back retrospectively. And I remember my mum repeating things, and me getting frustrated. Admittedly, I was a lot younger, and I was young, and in the middle of bossing things around and moving fast and all the rest of it. But I remember Mum saying the same thing multiple times. It's like, Mum, you just told me that. Um, and then I could start to see so Mum, you just told me that, and then it became annoying. Mum, you just told me that. And then a little bit later, I was just reading one of your blogs where you talked about how your mum was reading a calendar about a doctor's appointment, and that level of confusion, which really became a version of fear. And I do remember starting to see that and witness that in my mum when she sort of started to almost catch herself, if that was possible. She'd sort of catch herself and then sort of start to panic. That anxiety would come up and that sort of thing. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's and that was a pivotal point for me with my mom, in my relationship with her, because because of our history, this is a thing that's very important to me, and my wheelhouse is sort of the historical baggage. I'm all about the emotional state of the caregiver. And being really self-aware, because I think it's extremely important to understand, take our emotional temperature all the time, and be very mindful of that, because especially if it's a family member or somebody that reminds you of a family member. It can be that too.
yeah,
There's triggers, there's trauma triggers, and there's baggage and whatever. And my mom and she did not want me to help her. She was a very dynamic, active woman. Really, really a strong personality. She, I wonder who I take after. And she really had a hard time with me because we were so similar. And I had a really hard time being compassionate and empathetic with her, because I was
mm,
mad, I was angry. I had a lot of anger. I was carrying around. And I came around the corner and she was standing there, and we had big calendars, the big calendars you get in the stationery stores where you can put, and I had it for both of them with doctor's appointments and things like that. And
yeah,
I came around the corner and she didn't know I was seeing her. She didn't see me come around the corner. And with her red nail polish, she was pointing at the doctor's appointments. And I could just see on her face that she was completely lost. That
mm,
this woman who had all her appointments and schedules, and that she just couldn't connect to it.
Yeah.
It was like somebody smacked me, you know, and I just said to myself, oh my God, if this was a stranger, you know, you're such a kind person, you would be so kind and compassionate right now. It's not a stranger, it's your mother. You know, you have to get over it. You have to help her. She's so frightened. You know, she's losing her life. It's just, you know, the ground she's been walking on is just crumbling under her. And it was really kind of from that point on that I was able to find my way to the empathy and compassion that healed my relationship with her and allowed me, you know, to say, like, whatever you say, Mom, you know, instead of, you know, like, you know, don't you remember? You know what I mean? The compassion helped me find new ways to be with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a big moment for me.
Yeah, I was reading that, and again, retrospectively connecting my own dots and different experiences as we do. I think that highlights and shine the lights on our own growth, but also you know, that helps us move forward. And that was what I was finding when I was reading through the blogs, etc., which is why the resource hub that you've created is so super relevant for people that are going through different stages of their own journey to have that, you know, self-realization. And I can imagine just from the, you know, the experience of being thrown in the deep end, you know, your own personal development, I'm going to call it seminar, shift and growth and change, whatever you want to call it, would have been extraordinary. So what did you, I suppose, what's the thing that you learned about yourself that would become a good I suppose lighthouse for other people that are listening to us today?
Well, I think, you know, what came up for me immediately was I learned a very powerful thing, and I'm hoping that a lot of people will remember this, that this will be, because there's many gifts that come out of this. But I learned that I was a really good girl.
Yeah.
I learned that I was a really good girl, and that my ability to care for others and commit to changing my life, because they weren't going to change. They were in their 80s. Do you know what I mean? I mean, and you can't make other people change anyway. But I mean, you know, they were never going to change. You know, I mean, fixing them, I couldn't change them by fixing them. I had to change me. And my life and the way I lived my life and how I navigated my life and how I responded to them. And throughout the whole journey with them, you know, even though you have extraordinary moments of self-doubt and you second guess yourself, and, you know, it's never good enough or fast enough, or you know, I mean, caregivers torture themselves, you know, because it's such a big responsibility. You're responsible for somebody else's life, you know? So what in all of that, it made me realize that I really had the best intentions. I was really doing a really good job, and then I was a really good person, because, you know, I was loving someone no matter what the situation was, and I was doing the best I could every single moment.
Yeah.
I had the best intentions every single moment. I wasn't in it for the pay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was in it to make them safe and happy, you know, and to spend time with them. And, you know, I couldn't possibly deny that I was a good person. And I don't think I ever believed it before that.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah. Yeah. I see lots of different types, and types of caregivers when I'm in the supermarket and the shops, and I always look at them in awe in the way in which they serve, and what the reason I'm just mentioning that is, you know, the ability to let go of control, clearly is something that becomes very, very important. But I also think, and not trying to control them. So if I look reflectively, even if it's, trying to control a toddler, you've got to negotiate or sort of work around it, but you're never going to, as much as we like to think we can, we just can't. So I think that ability to let go of control is obviously a place where it all starts to come together, and you sort of get, you change that relationship, both of the one that you're having with yourself, but also the one that you're having with the person that you're actually caring for. Because when I was also reading through, there was two things that I picked up: don't argue and don't correct, and don't try to have the last word. And I went, oh, I like all of those at times. So that all humour aside, there's a when I could see the difference of where and when there was times where that was let go of, and the experience was very, very different. I remember, and I think I shared this story when I went to see my dad just before he passed. He was telling us about, this. He was telling us this story of his new love. That was this Indian woman, and they'd been off dancing, and they'd been doing all of these things together, all of which my dad did never like to do in his life. But he was happy in that moment, and that was the story that he was holding on to, and it was a beautiful time to experience that with him, and not correct him or, sort of asking odd questions to sort of trick him into going that, that's wrong and all those sorts of things. But the difference in being with him while he was in his story, I do remember that as, one of the very heart-touching moments that we got to experience. And that is that sort of that letting go of control, and asking the right questions so he could continue on this joyous journey that he was experiencing. So
yeah, and seeing the thing that's wonderful about that is you were able to find that space to go to. You know what I mean? Which is difficult.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? In other words, you worked on that. I know you did, because we have to work on that, because part of us, when something like that happens and they begin to tell stories, or they don't recognize us, or it's hard to accept that, because we're watching them be somebody we're not used to.
Yes.
We're watching them go somewhere that we can't travel with them, and panic, fear, anger, guilt, a lot of that stuff can come up, which I want to be very clear is absolutely normal. You're allowed to have those feelings, but sometimes, it's like a runaway train. You can't pull the feelings back, and you can't allow yourself to allow them to have that space. So it takes work to allow them to tell stories and fantasize and correct you and argue with you and tell, it's painful sometimes, but if you can break through that, and sort of take a deep breath and remind yourself that, they're here with you today, now, exactly as they're going to be. And you can find a place to be with them as they are, unconditionally. They know it brings them so much joy, and which indirectly brings you the joy, because they have moments of relaxation, joy, and comfort. I mentioned the "whatever you say, Mom" statement. My mom would argue with me about anything, and I picked the mantle up. I would, and speaking about, having the last word, that was really difficult for me, because that was our pattern. So it was astonishing to see when I wouldn't engage in that way, and I would say, oh, or I would try to say, oh, okay, tell me more about that. Or, and one day I just flew out of my mouth, okay, Mommy, whatever you say. Her entire face shifted. And I went, oh, that was a God shot. That was, that came through,
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I used it over and over and over again because it was almost as though she didn't even know who I was at the end. I mean, she did know who I was. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm saying for me to say to her, whatever you say, Mom, will just worked beautifully. Because then she would relax
Yeah.
and go on to something else. You know what I mean? We didn't have to have that,
The headbutts.
It was just, and the thing that's really amazing to me and the great gift of it is, she was an amazing lady. And when I tell you that I cannot think of an argument, What I think of now when I think of my mom is all the wonderful things she gave me.
Mm.
Prior to caregiving, taking care of her, being her caregiver, I would have that was a completely different story for me.
Yeah. There's always as you said, the gifts that come out of it, isn't there? Yeah. So, how do caregivers start to look after themselves? What are your tips? How do they? How do they start? If they're starting to realise that they're fatigued, they're feeling stressed and anxious, the bits before where your dad has got to, where you and I have both got to, and every other caregiver's got to, where we suddenly realise how tired we are. How do caregivers change that for themselves?
It's a very complicated answer to a very complicated question. The first thing is, for me, is self-awareness. I mean, which is something I think we all, we can all use no matter what we're doing in our lives, just in general. But I think that the first thing we have to realize is that, the way we approach caregiving, most of us think that we can do it alone. We can do it immediately, and we can control all of it. And I think that this self-awareness around that is a very dangerous way to approach it. Is the first step. Being self-aware. I mean, and having said all of this, there's no quick fix, and we're all going to be fatigued, and we're all going to be frustrated, and we're all going to wake up 3:00 in the morning in a cold sweat, shaking in fear and anxiety. It's part of the territory. I think what my message, I'm on a mission to get people to understand that if you're not prioritizing yourself, you're not going to get through it in a very pretty fashion. I mean, people have to understand that they must put themselves first. Period. There's no excuse. There's no exception. You have to make sure that you're self-aware. Then, you have to self-love, and then you have to do self-care. And I know it's the three selves, and it sounds so simple, but it's extraordinarily complex. And unless you're aware of what's going on in your head and in your heart and in your soul on a daily basis, multiple times a day, taking your emotional temperature all day long, we're all going to hit the wall, but you're going to hit the wall harder. I think, there's no ultimate answer on this. You're going to hit the wall, but are you going to go 20 miles an hour when you hit the wall, or are you going to be going 120 miles an hour? That's where we can make the adjustment.
And I was just laughing at that point, because while she was sharing that, I wrote down adding it to your schedule ? Because that was something I did. I just added that to my schedule, and you can't just add it to your schedule. It doesn't work like that. But
it doesn't work like that. It's got to be, it's the mindfulness. It's being in the moment. You have to you have to be self-aware 24/7.
Yeah.
You can't lose sight of it. And it's extremely difficult because you're in crisis management, 89% of the time. And you just have to work it in. And believe me, it took me a really long time. I stumbled. I came up with multiple ways. I have a toolbox that has 50 million tools in it, and I keep pulling at the tools. But the bottom line of it is that I have to be top of mind all the time. And I have to be self-aware, physically, emotionally, spiritual. I mean, you just have to be tapped in. And I've actually written a book, which is coming out in September. It's called Self-Care for Caregivers. And it's concerning the 4 areas that I consider to be really important: emotional, physical, spiritual, and then practical. And so there's like 140 tips and tricks that I used or found or made mistakes and then came up with solutions. Because it's the first job you have, and then the second job is caring for others. And it seems insurmountable, but once you start to get into a habit of checking your emotional, physical, and spiritual temperature, every day it gets easier.
Yeah. And I'm glad you've shared that, because when I was talking about the adding it to my schedule, I was just adding the caring to my schedule. So I've just I've just done this. So, and the first person I was always forgetting about was me. And then when you talked about crashing into the wall, doing it at 20 miles an hour, 60 or 120, 120, let's just go. But, that was part of my fast pacedness and just jamming more into the schedule. Well, unfortunately, the schedule doesn't expand. You've got to work out where the priorities are. And as we said, yes, caregiving, you want to be able to make the other person, the person you're caring for, the priority. But to do that, you need to make yourself the priority first.
Yes, because you want to be the best you. You want to bring who's going to take care of them if you get sick?
Yeah.
I mean, you want to bring the best you to it. They want you to bring the best you to it. I remember, I carved out, I don't know how I did it, but I carved out Sunday mornings for myself. I always wanted to ride horses. And I found a barn near my parents' house. And I carved out there's 2 hours, but I carved out 2 hours for myself to ride horses with a group of women who ended up all being caregivers. It was amazing. When you take care of yourself, the universe helps you. I know it sounds like, hippie, but I really believe that. And I mean, every single most of Sundays, although towards the end I wasn't able to do it, but I was able to get that 2 hours and ride around with these caregivers, and we would just laugh and cry and whatever. But I would come home, and my dad he would be waiting at the door, and he'd be like, "So tell me how it was." He was so happy that I did this for myself. He was so happy. He wanted to hear all about it. And, and I came back happier and more relaxed, in a different frame of mind. I mean, it helped me be a more grounded, kinder, more sensitive, more resilient caregiver.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And if I am telling you, guys and gals, you will you will find the time. My dad was on, anyway, he had a lot of heart issues at the end. Anyway, he would wait until I would get there to get sick. But I would always find, whether it was at 2 a.m, or I would always find the time to take care of him, or call the doctor, or get him to the ER, to the emergency room. I could always find the extra time in the schedule for them when they got sick or a crisis. Or it was amazing how I could create time.
Yeah.
Trying to find time to go ride the horses, or take a shower, or, get some fresh air, or eat some cookies. What I mean? Seems so impossible. But if I needed to do that for my mom or dad, I could find the time.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's how you frame it. How you frame it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very well said. Thank you very much. So there's a great practical tip. And I was going to ask you, based on your book and the 4 areas, can you share perhaps if that was probably the favorite practical tip, is, time that is available for you as much as it is for the people you're caring for. What's your second most favourite practical tip that we can talk about from the book, so we can give people an insight into the book and what's going to be available for them?
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. It's lovely. My favorite thing that I talk about and I love is HALT.
Mm.
You know, halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Okay. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Stop multiple times during the day and take your emotional temperature. Halt. You halt. Am I hungry? Eat something. Am I angry? Talk to someone. Try to
Mm.
work through it. Am I lonely? Pick the phone up. And am
Mm.
I tired? Take a break.
Mm.
Halt and take care of yourself. It's real simple and
Mm.
so hard to do. But that's one of my favorites because it really helped me.
I love
I trained myself, I had to. I'm very visceral. I feel my anxiety,
that.
my stomach, my head. I'm very physical around my negative emotions. So I try to train myself. Like, are my shoulders like, you don't
Yeah,
even realize.
it is.
Yeah, like drop your shoulder, it's like, oh my God. So I had to really train myself,
Mm.
um, on a daily basis, multiple times a day to do my call. It was really important for me.
And I think I love that, because as you were sharing that, and I've written it down, and you were saying it, I've gone, oh, I'm all of those sometimes during the day, all of those at once.
Yeah.
And then when Rory, bless him, comes home from uni, I should say, and starts asking me a whole lot of questions, and I go, just not now, and then I can feel this is it. So I haven't done it, and then all of a sudden I can feel it all coming up. I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm tired, I was alone and I'm not now, and I'm feeling interrupted, but I didn't like being alone, and it just all sort of bubbles up and erupts. So, and that is such a key thing for, taking care of yourself and doing that barometer check-in, a temperature check-in. And it's such a great way to do it, because we obviously get the early signs of, hey, you're hungry, let's go and do something about it, which is less, if you take care of that in that moment, the other ones are less likely to start compounding on the others. But I've found it a good little insight lesson for myself as to not letting it all compound at once, is probably a really good practical tip.
It is, and it's difficult. I get it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's really difficult because we're very distracted. We're distracted by the need to care for people that we love, and we're worried about them constantly. I mean, there's like I always said that there was like a river of worry that kind of was constantly flowing underneath everything I did.
Mm.
And it was so unconscious that I had to really force myself to say, are where's your anxiety level around this? Where's are you tense? Are you what do that feeling when you're sort of worried about something, but you don't even kind of know what it is? I think caregivers walk around with that a lot, and it's dangerous. I mean, you have to really be aware of it, and you have to do everything you can to soothe it. I mean, self-soothing is an extremely important tool, and it's so different everyone has a different way to self-soothe, but get your ducks in a row around it, and try different things and experiment, but figure out any way you can to get to a happy place and have it waiting.
Yes.
Because you're going to need it.
Yeah. I think too, I'd love for you to share some of the resources and places. Now, obviously, you've got your site is a resource for caregivers, etc. But you also do share some of the other things and places that people can go to assist them on the journey. So can you talk us through a bit of both of those as well? So for those that are starting to go, perhaps I did hear some of those teachable lessons today, but I just might need to explore it. Those ones that are still in control freak mode, that are just where do they start?
Well, the big control, what I call the hard cases, like me,
Yeah,
it's like a hard case.
Yep.
The first thing you need to do for the hard cases is admit that you're a hard case. In other words, the very thing that makes you an extraordinary caregiver is that you're controlling issues, which, I mean, taking control over details and medical crises is wonderful. However, um, control, we really don't have control over anything. So the first thing the hard cases have to do is to start to slightly understand they don't control anything, and to find some new practices. For me, one of the greatest things I was able to do is get in touch with other caregivers.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I had a big commute to go back and forth with my parents, and I had caregivers that I would call on the phone as I was driving, and just scream and yell, or get advice from, or we would just talk and share. So, I mean, the best thing you can do is get your tribe.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of caregivers out there. So, you can find them in the supermarket. And
Yes.
like, I would have some great conversations with people while I was paying for groceries, because I was open, and I would start a conversation. I said, well, I'm taking care of my parents. Oh, I'm taking care of you. Do you know what I mean? I was riding horses. Like, I started saying, oh, I'm a caregiver. I'm a caregiver. I'm a caregiver. I'm a caregiver. So I really actively pursue. I mean, just like you would in business.
Yes.
You have mentors, right? Or you have, positive role models that you would, right? I mean, it's really important. And being a control freak, it's difficult because there's a little bit of vulnerability around that. Some of us have that issue, and we don't reach out as much easily. But I really forced myself to reach out to other caregivers, because it was an invaluable source of to me, of wisdom and compassion and just support. I mean, no one understands you like another caregiver. It's like a language. It's like, it has its own language.
Yeah. And I think that's that collective wisdom of, even just in the simplicity of realizing that you're not the only one experiencing this stuff, that others are experiencing similar stuff in different ways, but the stuff is not just yours. You can, as you said, you've got that universal language or understanding of, what's going on. And I think that becomes very, very important.
Oh, it's brilliant, and sharing our stories is just extraordinarily. It's so amazing, and there's such help there. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I've been through that too, or, oh, here's what I did, or, and quite often, laughter is found there, which is an extraordinary source of help. No one can laugh harder together than caregivers. I mean, it's like, something happens when two or more of us are joined together. It's like the laughter about the situation, because you can't make this crap up. Do you know what I mean? I mean, and everybody, do you know what I mean? You can't make it up. And just sharing, and then having the experience together, and the laughter around it. I've laughed so hard with caregivers,
Yeah. I'm just there's a couple of sentences, and I know we're getting close to the end, but there's one thing I want to finish on. I know it's gone so fast, hasn't it? So there was one thing, let me just read it. It said, be open to scream, cry, laugh, and finally arrive home after the ride of your lifetime, which I think which is what you've expressed, is the beauty of being able to share with other caregivers and find resources and come together in that aspect. But you also have said that one of your favorite sayings is, I love the saying that we are all just walking each other home. So talk us through that as we go into the last few minutes of the show.
I mean, isn't that beautiful? It's just such a beautiful thing, because it's really something, I feel in my heart. I used to be a singer-songwriter. I used to sing. And, I always felt that, when just that there was like a oneness to everything, and I do believe that we are just all walking each other home. I think we get lost and we bang into each other, you know. I think it's a very strange walk, but I think when it really comes down to it, we're really just walking each other home. And I think the beauty of that saying is that when you can get there and you can feel that, there's a compassion not only for those that we're walking home, but the people who are walking us home. Like there's compassion for ourselves. And I think, we're caregivers are some of the kindest, most amazing people in the universe, and they have such a wealth and depth of compassion for others, because that's why we do what we do. But there's so little that we give to ourselves, and there's so much of it to spread around. We have to claim some of that. So we're all just walking each other home, sort of slow down and just really be with other people and be with the people that you're caregiving and be with yourself and be in the moment and just be as compassionate to yourself as you are to those that you're caring for. They want that for you.
Yeah.
My mom on her deathbed said to me, she said, why am I so sick? And I said, oh, Mommy, I really don't know, I'm so sorry. And she said, oh, don't you be sorry. You've always taken such good care of me all of your life. And that's something I wanted to hear from her all of my life. That's what I need to hear, And we were just walking each other home, I didn't have to think about it twice. It's just, that's what our job is.
Yeah. And I think it was a beautiful expression of how your dad was acknowledging you too, when he was waiting excitedly to find out how it went at the horse riding and those sorts of things, because he could see your joy and your, the change of you when you came back through after having, those few moments to yourself. So how and what are the best ways people can get in contact with you? Obviously, you've got your website, which is caregiverwarrior.com. So they can find you through your website, which is just going across the ticker at the moment. So that's caregiverwarrior.com. And you also mentioned you've got a new book coming out. So if you can just reiterate that. I think you said.
Yes, I'm very excited. I don't have the book cover yet, but I have they just sent me it's so sweet. It's coming out September 6th. You can pre-order it now, which I would love for you to do, and let me know what you think. If you do get it, review it. That'd be wonderful. Yeah. I'm very excited about that. And I also have a free book on my website, the Little Caregiver Guide to Survival, which I would love people to sign up, just to get them started and to sort of realize that you're not alone. And, just reach out to me, go to my website, walk around.
Have a look.
Let me know if there's something you want me to discuss or write about. We're all, I always say we're all on the same journey. We just have different paths. So
yes, so very true. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing so much with you today. Thank you very, very much. So the website's up on the screen there. It's caregiverswarrior.com. And as Susanne mentioned, there's a new book coming out, which is also you can see and pre-order on the website. And you've got the Caregiver's Little Guide to Survival, which is a free download, which you can also do from there. So for those that are caregivers and maybe experiencing it on their own, there is a great resource and a great tool and a very big heart that can help you along and continue on that journey with you. So thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and I trust that you got some inspirational tips to move you forward. You can find this episode along with many more on your favorite streaming platform such as iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for more Success Secrets Exposed with Sally A. Curtis.